Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today, you're going to be a member of the council of a place called Blackthorn. You're going to be trying to gain political influence over 4 different factions. Now, as you gain that influence, you're going to be doing some shady backroom deals, which is going to, call some attention to you. At the end of the game, even if you have the most influence, if you have the most shady deals done, you gain the most treason points, you will get beheaded and you can't win. We're talking about Council of Blackthorn from Great Northern Games. This is a 2 to 6 player game. It's on Kickstarter right now. I'm going to show you how it's played. I'll see you on the other side. In Council of Blackthorn, everyone is a unique character trying to gain favor and influence over 4 different factions like the legions, the nobles, the peasants, and the guilds. And they'll be trying to gain points with their tokens as they move up on different factions, which will turn into points at the end of the game. They'll also be scoring influence points, which will be held hidden during the game in front of them, and they'll be gaining points by creating buildings. However, as you score influence, you'll also be getting treason, which at the end of the game is terrible because the one with the most treason is beheaded and cannot win the game. Now, since this is a Kickstarter preview, I want you to know that the components and or artwork is subject to change for the final version. Now, at the beginning of the game, each player is going to select one of the 6 possible characters in the game, like Lord of War, Master of Shadows, Queen, Lord of Tower, Minister of Coin, and 7th Vigil. They'll select these and they will have some special actions that only they will be able to take throughout the game. At the beginning of the game, each player takes their character card with the special actions. They will get 3 cards of treason, which will be placed face down so that nobody knows how much treason they actually have, and they'll also get 5 cards from the faction deck. Those characters are denoted by these little tokens that will be moving up as they score influence in certain factions, and these will end up turning into points at the end of the game. At the beginning of the round, the start player, who is the right hand of the king, will roll all these faction dice and place them in the corresponding area. Then, starting with that player, the start player that has this token of the right hand of the king, will get to do either an action from their special character or from a building they may have built in a previous turn. For example, this says, you may force an opponent to take one of your randomly chosen treason cards if the noble die is 3. Well, in this case, the red noble die is 3. I would take these treason cards, and one of my opponents of my choice would have to randomly take one. Remember, those are terrible points because whoever has the most at the end cannot win and is beheaded. Then I can play a card from my hand from basically the faction deck. Let's play it. I play the princess. Now the first thing that happens is we resolve the dice effect of this. And since this is the red faction, which is noble, I would look at the die that's on the noble, and it's a 3. If it's a 3, for example, that's the highest one, I would gain 3 faction levels, 1, 2, 3, on this noble track. But because it's a very high one, I also would have to draw 2 cards from the treason deck, so secretly, I've gotten 3 points of treason, which again is very bad. If this was a 1 or a 2, I simply would move up 1 or 2 on the faction track. If it is a 0, meaning it's blank, I don't get to go anywhere on the faction track, but I get to give any player, shuffle these up, and give any player 1 random treason card. So depending on what the dice have, 0, 1, 2, or 3 might change your decision on which faction card you play at that time, and remembering that these dice are rolled once at the beginning of every round. Then we trigger possibly the text effect. This says that if my level of the guild faction is at a level of 4, I can enact this effect. So we look at the guild faction track, and I'm only at a level of 3 right now. I'm not at 4, so I cannot do that effect, and that card essentially gets discarded. But if I did have this amount at that point in time, I could increase one of my faction scores by 2 levels if it's at a level of 5 or lower. Then if the noble, which is the red die, is a 0 or 1, lower 1 faction score of a target by 1 level. So this essentially just allows you to move faction tracks up and down, assuming that I had that level of ability. Either way, this would go to a discard pile whether it was enacted or not. Then next I draw up to 5 cards. I can discard any one of my faction cards first if I would like to, and then draw back up to 5. Of course, these are always kept secret from other players. I then get to score all the guilds. If I'm in the lead for that faction, I will gain 2 of these influence points. I'll get that, put it in front of me, and put it face down so that nobody can see what it is. If we're tied and I'm above 0, I get 1 influence. For every faction I'm in the lead, that happens. Now we're going to talk about buildings in a little bit more detail later, but at this point, if you have the most buildings in play, you'll also get 2 influences. If you're tied with the most, you get 1. That's the entire turn sequence for one player, and everybody else would keep going till it was the end of the round, and then this would pass to the next player, they'd re-roll the dice, and we would start again. Let's show you some of these other cards and how the buildings work. Now last turn in the play card phase, I played an ally, which is basically a character that allows me to do something. The other types of cards are buildings. And when you play these buildings, the first time you play them as your turn, they go sideways because they're being constructed. At the end of your turn, it goes through everybody else's turn. When it becomes back to your turn, the first thing you'll do is turn it upright because the building has been constructed. Now, you can either take that action at the beginning of your turn, like I said before, by one of the things from your special character, or a building that's been constructed. Now, assuming here you could re-roll a die up to 3 times. Or maybe on this one, you could reduce your level of this faction by 1, and if you do, increase 1 level of any other faction. Some of these buildings are actually they're not actions, they're just text events that allow you to do, and you have to obviously have that level 4 of this faction in order to use this. At the end of the game, any building that is completed is going to be worth a certain amount of points. There's one other type of card you can play on your turn. Again, you can only play one, but this is an event called Whispers. You get to gain 1 faction level in any single faction, and then you go through and the first person in each faction basically has to get a treason card, including the person who has the most buildings, but you are immune to this effect. And when moving up faction tracks, people can be in the same level until someone gets 13 and they have blocked this out and nobody else can get past them. Now this game flow will continue until the end of a round when at least 3 of the factions are blocked at the level of 13, and then we go to the end game. Each player will receive points for whatever level they are at each of the 4 faction tracks. They will also flip over and add up all of their secret influence points. They will add up the points on all their completed buildings. Then the player with the lowest influence at that point tallies up and says how much treason they have, and you do the same for everybody else with higher point totals. Whoever has the most treason is beheaded and they die. If players are tied, multiple people can be beheaded. You can all tie and everyone loses, but that person's beheaded and the one who is still alive and has the most influence is the winner. Now let's look at some of the special abilities and the characters that you'll select at the beginning of the game. Lord of the Tower. For an action, you can force an opponent to take 1 of your randomly chosen treason cards. You also can score 3 of these, basically these influence, for each highest faction score, and 2 for being tied for the most highest. So it just gives you more points for the factions. If you move on to a 13-point level, and opponent's located in that level, bump him or her down 1 level. So this is the only one that allows you to kind of bump somebody else off the top. And actions, this one can do one of the other. Gain 1 faction level in any one faction if the guild die is a 1. Pay 1 influence and re-roll up to the dice up to 2 times. For the Master of Shadows, you can pay 2 influence tokens and give 1 of your treason cards to a target. Choose card randomly. Lord of the War, you can pay 2 influence and reduce the faction score of a target by 1 level, but the target can't be in a 13-point level. We have the Queen. Re-roll the noble or peasant die once. Look at the 7th Vigil. Has lots of different actions. They can discard a poison card, which is one of those treasons. You can pay 1 influence to reduce the trigger cost of played currently by 1 level the rest of your turn, and discard a peasant card and gain 1 level in any one faction. So this is different things that the actions that they can select if you're the 7th Vigil. Alright, well there is Council of Blackthorne. Now this is done by Great Northern Games, who did a game that I liked and reviewed last year that was called Noble Treachery. It was sort of a card game, kind of like Red 7 with special abilities is the way I put it, a more gamer version of sort of a Red 7 take. And this is more of a full-fledged board game where yes, the board's there and you're moving up and down tracks, but the game's really in the cards. And you'll notice that because of that, the rules and the rounds are very streamlined. I mean, it's very easy. You're playing a card, you're doing an action, you're doing pretty much one of those things per turn, and it moves quickly and it's simple, but really the game is trying to figure out how to combo your cards, which factions am I moving up on. There's a little bit of a take that where you're making people take some of your treason. Has that interesting thing where, you know, similar to say Cleopatra, the Society of Architects, was that corruption, and similar to Lords of Waterdeep was that corruption, as you can do things well, but it's going to gain some attention that will do bad things for you in the end, and that's always interesting. If this looks interesting to you, it's on Kickstarter right now. There is a link just below this video in the YouTube description. Go ahead and click on there and check out the whole entire page. I'm sure the people at Great Northern Games would appreciate. I'll see you next time.